We are live. Hooray! We made it. Thank you. Okay, so just to introduce today's stream, we are continuing our focus on neurodiversity, which we've been doing all throughout this month. And this stream, we are going to primarily be talking about how we can be more neuro-inclusive or inclusive of people with neurodiversities. A few housekeeping bits just before we begin. You can put questions in chat and we will try to get to all of them if you have anything that you would like to ask our panelists, in addition to some of the prepared questions that I've got. But please be respectful. I shouldn't need to say it, but if there's any kind of inappropriate or disrespectful behaviour, you will just get immediately banned. So let's keep it nice and thoughtful and kind, please. But without further ado, I'll quickly introduce myself. If you're not sure, I'm Sky. I work for Safe in Our World as the Partnerships and Training Officer, and I will be hosting this panel today. And then what we'll do is we'll go around and just ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So, Anderona, I'm going to pick on you first because you're first there on my screen. Could you just, tell everyone kind of who you are, what you do, and then a little bit about what type of neurodiversity you have?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anderona Cole, and I work as an external relations and public affairs officer at GIS. I'm also co-chair of their in-house neurodiversity group. Now, right before the pandemic, I was working for the industry trade body UK. I spent a lot of time trying to get the Raise the Game initiatives off the ground. I'm here today to contribute to the discussion because I have a formal diagnosis of dyspraxia, and that comes with learning difficulties associated with dyslexia.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you did with Raise the Game. I know that that's been a really important mission within the industry, and some really great stuff has come from that. Blushing, would you like to go next? Tell us a bit about yourself and what type of neurodiversity you have.
So I'm BlushingCrafter. I don't work in this traditional sense, but I do advocate, and I'm an activist on Twitch, TikTok, Twitter, etc. Gaming, but also education of people on, among other things, mental health and neurodiversity. Words, they're hard. I am an ADHDer, and I deal with directing my attention where I need to be. Processing is a thing for me. It's a bit hard sometimes, or a lot of the time. And I have hyperactivity, the kind you can see and the kind that is on the inside. And executive functioning, meaning I can often struggle with getting things done or even starting on them. So that's kind of ADHD in a nutshell for me. But also I have an extra drive, big time, that helps me. So that hyperactivity pushes me sometimes also. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll be able to expand a bit on the sort of both the different things that people with neurodiversities have to deal with, but hopefully also the good things that come with it. So thank you for highlighting that. Now I am going to go by who's next on the stream, because I realise I've done that a little bit out of order. But JJ, would you like to go next in terms of introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is JJ Fox. I am known mostly for the name Himble Ventures on Twitter and TikTok and Ko-fi. So my username is literally my games project that I'm working on as an indie game developer.
Awesome.
Yeah, and about my neurodiversity, I was diagnosed when I was 4 years old with autism. So, and with autism, with being on the autism spectrum, I do experience some sort of brain overloads at times. So there's a lot of information to process. For example, if I was going shopping with my mum, there's always a busy environment. Got lots of lights, sounds, textures. I can kind of struggle a bit with food textures as well. But I do do think of ways to cope with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and if you see me in general, I'm not like this is a form of stimming that I do. So a lot of people will just use fidget spinners. I've tried fidget spinners before, but personally, I like to use a piece of ribbon. Yeah, so normally I would stim physically like this, but also verbally stimming in private. Just do have nervous tics at times, but it's my own kind of normal, really.
Yeah.
And normally, if I'm meeting strangers, I normally like to. Well, I don't like to, but I feel I should, out of respect. Is like I mask my autistic traits at times.
Thank you. I think as well, recently this month you were on the Safe Space podcast with Rosie in a really, really good, moving episode.
Right, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really good. We'll definitely pop that link in the chat, probably, if Rosie's around to do it, and we'll definitely put it in the YouTube description as well.
Yeah, and I'll be talking about my game in there.
Yeah, awesome. And then Atari, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi guys, I'm Atari, and I'm a content creator and writer. I've been streaming on Twitch for a few years, and recently I've been working on YouTube and the upcoming launch of my own site. As far as my neurodiversity goes, I have an attentive ADHD, so for me that means like forgetting my keys or my phone whenever I leave the house, or forgetting something important that I need to do, being in the middle of a million different tasks and maybe only getting one done, daydreaming while talking to someone, and no matter how important it is, just not being able to focus on it. In gaming, if there are too many quests, or if the user interface is super busy, then I just can't focus. And sometimes all of that comes with waves of anxiety and depression and other things. And when these things happen every day, it leads into some frustrating and sometimes embarrassing situations. And I'm only just now in my 30s learning how to cope and handle these manifestations of ADHD, because it really, neurodiversity is just a never-ending journey.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, there's a lot of people who are only just getting diagnosed, later in life when they're already an adult. Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing, which, on the one hand, it's great that we have better diagnostic tools so we can identify these things, but also it's like a period where you're now in your 30s and you're just like relearning all these things and learning how to cope with something that realistically has been there for your entire life. So yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I can see the Demented Raven in the chat said that they also got diagnosed with autism as an adult, and I think it is now that it's much better understood, it's much more common to secure those diagnoses, I guess. And then Adam, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, my name is Adam Boyne. I run an indie games and work players with BetaJester. I also run the community and podcast Game Dev London, and I also run the recently announced group Playing Attention for ADHD in the games industry. I was diagnosed, on the subject of adults being diagnosed, I was diagnosed with ADHD April last year. So I went through my whole life sort of dealing with the consequences of having ADHD without ever knowing that's what it was, and only sort of leading up to and after being diagnosed, able to go, oh, okay, that's why I did all those things. And that is a process that I'm still going through now and still learning about how it's affected my life so far and what I can do around that. And to be specific, I'm diagnosed as combined as well. So a combination of forgetting things internally and hyperactivity on the outside, a lot of singing, a lot of dancing, a lot of moving around with the fun stuff, as well as the not being able to sit still, distractible, and other stuff as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's so interesting to you know, from what I've heard from people who've been diagnosed later in life, to have that like realization moment of like, oh, like literally everything that's ever happened in my life kind of makes sense now. So yeah, that's something that I'm sure we can talk about forever.
I too was diagnosed as an adult, actually July of last year, officially, but we knew for a long time before that.
Yeah. And how did you find that? Was it a very similar kind of situation whereby it was like a light bulb moment, or because you said you were like aware of it for quite a long time after, was it more just like a now it's official type thing?
More like now it's official, but deeper understanding for sure by talking to a lot of people and having officially the label helped when I talked to other people to explain things.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that helps as well.
Sorry?
Yeah, I agree. That is a good way of working it out, chatting with others.
Yeah. Because JJ, you're kind of in a slightly different position, because you mentioned you were diagnosed at 4, which is really young. Do you feel like that has meant that throughout your life you've had like kind of more tools at your disposal?
Well, I wasn't told the truth until I was a bit older.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing that I kind of want to talk about, and it's great that we've got a few people on this panel today who are spearheading these types of initiatives in their own workplaces, but I'd love to know about what your experience has been in terms of getting adjustments and support in the workplace relating to your neurodiversity. I will go around in a slightly different order now, so I'm going to come to Atari first. I could see in your eyes you were like, oh. But yeah, if you'd like to tell us a bit about your experience in work first.
Sure. So it's been a bit difficult for me because I also was only diagnosed about a year ago. But it's helped me immensely, that diagnosis, because now I know why I do certain things, like you were saying earlier. It makes me wish I had known sooner, though, because in the workplace you had to conform, and sometimes conforming means being uncomfortable. And also in the workplace, it's very much like there's only one way to go about things. Whereas being neurodiverse, sometimes we can think a little bit more creatively and do things in ways people hadn't thought about before. But now I know. So it's important to me to ask potential employers and interviews what they're doing in regards to supporting neurodiversity in the workplace, because I don't want to put myself in the position again to have to feel that way while working.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's a really good sign at the point of hiring to have something in your hiring process, your job advert or whatever, to reflect that you are willing to make adjustments and be flexible for people, you know, whether they're neurodiverse, whether they're physically disabled, whether, you know, they've got anything else at all going on, you know, parents, carers, all that. And it is nice to see that a lot of companies are getting a little bit more flexible and understanding that kind of stuff a little bit better. Okay, Blushing, would you like to go next and tell us a little bit about your experience with support and accommodations in work, please?
So I have been not in the traditional workforce for many years, but when I was of course struggling with the same things. And being in a situation where you are in a call center, big open landscape, people talking on the phone around you, you're supposed to sit there, headphones on, microphone right here by your mouth, shut everything else out. Seriously, if you're going to be hiring people for jobs like that, make sure that at least there's some kind of protection, right? Because I struggle with that and I couldn't ask for adaptation, right? It wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience. I couldn't ask.
Yeah, I think that it is interesting and probably something that we'll touch on a little bit in the next question, or one of the later questions, is like having the formal diagnosis can be really helpful in terms of having that like proof and that element of like legitimizing it, that you can ask for those adjustments. But I mean, realistically, I just honestly think that you should be able to get adjustments like that regardless of whether you have a formal diagnosis or not, or regardless of whether you have a neurodiversity or an anything or not. But yeah, I'm sure we'll chat about that a little bit later. For now, Anderona, can you tell us a little bit, please, about your experience in the workplace with your neurodiversity?
Yes, of course. So I got diagnosed later on in life, like most of the people on this call. I found out during my final year of university, and then went on and had adjustments made throughout the course of my master's. But the workplace is a different ballgame, right? My condition affects me insofar as I'll be writing text and the connectives like and the, I'll look up and I've proofread something on the screen. I'm like, why is it not physically there when I print it out? So it's all about kind of developing ways of checking my work and strategies for how things look visually on the screen. I don't know whether other people can relate to, changing the background to a different color, so the colors white and black aren't contrasted as much. My experience of the workplace has been mainly around getting assistance from a government scheme called Access to Work. I don't know if anybody you've dealt with them before. So it's not perfect, but it's one of those government-backed programs where they allow an assessor to come in, see how you do your role. They come up with a report. Sometimes there are delays, so it can take a while, and there's also that kind of element of putting things into place. Now, there's no one size fits all when it comes to different programs and strategies, so a lot of it is about trial and error. In my current role, I joined at a time where the backlog at Access to Work was intense, so I sat down with our facilities team and we went through one by one, different things that we can implement and when. And it's really important that it's not that overload, because sometimes it can feel a bit much. And so I kind of went through each adjustment gradually, I was required to give feedback at each juncture and so on. But I found that over time, I found what works, and I found a really good way of ensuring that my employer can get the best out of me.
That's awesome. I'm really glad that you were able to, get through that process and figure out what felt right. And you're right. I think Access to Work, while it's not perfect, it is a good resource, and it can help people, quite a lot with all sorts of things, no matter what their condition or their disability is. Adam, would you like to go next and tell us a little bit about your experience in work?
Yeah, so I actually have two quite contrasting things, which is, since university, I've been running my own studio for the last almost 8 years now. So my accommodations are kind of the fact that I can accommodate for myself, which is a very privileged position to be in, for sure. So from my perspective, it's a lot about how I work, try and support people that I work with, which I'll come back to in a second. But the last place that I worked, going all the way back, I remember, obviously, long before I was diagnosed, things like frequently singing in the office, to the point where I was banned from singing in the office. Partly, I think this was annoying to people, partly because they said the songs that I sang were catchy ones that got in everybody's head. But there was certainly a lot of expecting me to just kind of know things or react to situations in certain ways that I was never taught to react to them, or being able to take on roles and positions without anybody kind of explaining to me, and then being pulled up on when I didn't get them. Obviously, at the time, I was just like, I don't know, I can't explain why these expectations exist and why I didn't fit within them. And only after diagnosis and reflection can I go, oh, that, they expected that because that's how the people they worked with before had worked, or how a neurotypical might approach a situation. But about somebody sitting down and explaining to me what it was like, or what was expected, or how it was meant to be, or taking that time, wasn't something I was going to know. Which then comes back to me as an employer, as a boss now. I'm very conscious of having, so we have a majority neurodivergent management team, and we have a number of neurodivergent employees, and I am very cautious about making sure that we have understanding. My perspective is that if a person is capable of performing this level of work and it doesn't happen, that's the fault of the person who gave them the work, the fault of the person in charge because they didn't communicate it properly with them. And so I'm very careful to try and think about how can I explain this clearly? How can I communicate the information? How can I build systems of communication that work best for the individuals in my team? And try to bring those accommodations, the same that I would want to expect in a workplace, into my own workplace as an employer.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that you raised something really interesting there in terms of that one-size-fits-all approach, because, I mean, in my experience, having worked in the sort of like training sector in a few different companies before, even when you approach things like onboarding and like training, usually there is a training plan and that's what you deliver to people, and you always deliver it the same way, no matter who you're delivering it to, no matter how many people. And then, you know, like, people are surprised when certain people don't know how to do something, or like, because that wasn't how they took on the information. And that goes for, you know, anyone, whether you're neurodiverse or not. You might just have a different means of learning, but I think that we do need to move away from that kind of one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to delivering information, or even just communicating like throughout the day in your workplace, and trying to find the way that works best for that person, even if it means doing it differently from how you might do it for another person and so on. JJ, would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I've had moments where I used to do customer service, and I also speak with managers, and sometimes I get a bit of a brain fog. Like, it takes me a while to like answer questions because I have to process a lot of information through my head, and I'm also like doing lots of other different tasks. So my brain, I get so lost into the task I'm doing that I struggle to verbal communicate, and which is why I prefer to write things down or type. But some people don't like it and would rather do like a mouth to mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with my freelancers, while working on the game, we're always writing, because at times, yes, I'll have a like an information overload. We've been doing it via typing on Discord, like text it, well, not texting, but it's all written, and and I have a lot of time to think of the right answer, just think of the question carefully, and just try and communicate what I want and be fair on them.
Yeah. And it's really good that you're in a position where you can have those accommodations now, but it's a shame that previously people had been very rigid and resistant to it. And that's quite a theme that, you know, we've talked about here, but I've heard with a lot of people who are neurodivergent, is that when they don't respond or behave in a neurotypical way, they're seen as being like, you know, cold or inconvenient or like, you know, impossible to work with or whatever it happens to be, rather than
distanced.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than, I guess, the person who's doing the communicating thinking, what can I do differently? The immediate reaction is, well, that they're doing it wrong, clearly.
I don't like it if they have like a cold headmaster like manner towards neurodiverse people. I don't like it.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we've come on to a couple of interesting ideas so far, but I'd love to expand on this one a little bit more. What do you all feel that managers or workplaces can do better to accommodate neurodiverse staff? And this is the point at which we'll also talk about whether or not they have a formal diagnosis. But yeah, I'd love to dive into the types of accommodations that you all have been discussing so far, and like what further things workplaces could do. And as well as workplaces, we'll look at, I guess, any professional setting. So we'll look at educational settings. So if you want to talk about adjustments you wish you'd had when you were in education and stuff, that's fine. Or things in work. Now, I am going to go with blushing first, please. If you could, let us know kind of what adjustments you feel like companies should be making more often.
One idea is, if possible, give people more individual spaces, or if not possible, lower numbers of people in one space.
Mm-hmm.
And the walls that I was talking about, like in between the spots, even if they're see-through, but ideally not. Honestly, just make me not distracted, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also learn more about people's different neurodiversities, right? Different ways of being neurodivergent. Get the knowledge on your own initiative,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even educate management, leadership, and staff,
Yeah.
so that people know and understand more without us being the educators all the time. Some of us can do it. I really do it all the time. Even though I'm not in traditional work setting, anything like any situation I'm in, any setting I'm in small ways or bigger ways, I'm helping people learn, but not all people can.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And some people can one day, but then the next they're just overwhelmed, cannot, no energy, right?
Yeah. I think that there is often an expectation put on, underrepresented groups, marginalized groups of people to do the educating themselves. You're the one who's neurodiverse, so you should be telling me like what to do. But that is, it's unfair and it's exhausting for someone to constantly be having to explain themselves. So I think that your point about training is really, really valid, and the more training that companies and institutions can commit to, the better, because when you have that broader understanding, I mean, even if you let's look at like ADHD for an example, even if you look that up for a minute, you learn so many things about it that you didn't already know. And actually, if you look at things like dyslexia and dyspraxia and dyscalculia, there's so many things about those conditions as well that are not the, I guess, like the stereotyped view of it. So yeah, I mean, I would wholeheartedly recommend training for sure.
Another idea I had, though, that schools have been doing more in the recent years, and they have done that for both of my kids. They're young adults now. I wish they had done that for me while I was in school, up until senior high.
Mm-hmm.
Headphones to close out other people's sounds, even though
Yeah.
they're just scribbling in the book or typing on the laptops that they so often have in schools now. Just so that people are able to have a little less energy spent on closing sounds out. Because some of us, like me, I could never do that. I was so tired at the end of the school day. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and it's good that you can have, like people who have headphones and people who don't have headphones, because it's similar to that like work from home conversation that's very topical right now. Some people work a lot better in an office environment, but some people need the lack of distraction in their home turf in order to do their job well. And it's this whole, it always comes back to, it's not one size fits all. There's not going to be one solution. You have to be able to be flexible. JJ, would you like to talk to us next about accommodations that you feel like should be made?
Yeah, because I have a feeling that at the end of the day, it's always been like the neurodiverse people speaking for autism and ADHD and other lots of neurodiverse. Well, wouldn't say conditions. I've written some notes down.
Good shout.
Yeah. Okay, our workplace. It feels like that. Well, I know I like to have my own working space. But at times I'd like a chance to work with a team as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was given that opportunity to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, so
you kind of felt like you were excluded from the team, is that?
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like feeling isolated.
Yeah.
So I like people to be aware that yes, I would like my quiet moments when I need it.
Yeah.
It fluctuates over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Our needs. So at times we don't always need a quiet space, and we'd like to mingle have a break from work and
Yeah.
and yeah, but and it. Sorry, my brain's gone blank.
No, that's okay. You can, take your time. And I think that you raised really interesting points about, how, well, it's like what we were saying earlier, whereby you kind of start being seen as, like, inconvenient or, like, cold or, cold, distant, problematic. And that...
Which I don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, just because sometimes you need to be away from people doesn't mean that you always want to be away from people, like...
Absolutely. It fluctuates.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That's a really, really good point to raise. Okay.
And there are still, sorry.
No, you go.
So if some workplaces or educational places may have have a support, support and well-being,
Mm-hmm.
some support like that, something like that. But then, yeah, it feels like we have to explain to them our needs, so they don't always know what we want. So it's down to us just to help them understand us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's similar to what Anderona was saying a minute ago about access to work and just figuring out what works for you, but making use of student support and those types of services can be really valuable, because often I think that there's quite a lot that they can do that you're not necessarily aware of up front unless you start asking for stuff. So yeah, thank you for that. And I guess what I'll do now is I'll ask Anderona for your input, because since we're kind of talking about education, I know that you work in that sort of sector, so I'd love to hear your input on what you feel could be done.
Yes, of course. I mean, there's so much to be done to improve understanding, but
Mm-hmm.
overall what we've seen as an organisation is that shift, the post-pandemic shift to online learning, and suddenly it's incredibly easy to use technological tools to help students get the best learning experience. So that could be closed captioning, the ability to rewind and also pause and then come back to content. We also have an in-house accessibility team, and they work really closely alongside institutions. I know that the Open University in 2020 and 2021 went about setting up an AI tool. Now that AI tool called Taylor was one that just removed the administrative burden. We talked a lot about it, kind of the onus being on the individual to kind of push for things. And so this particular tool, for instance, you'll just say one particular thing that is going on from a disability perspective. That could be from a neurodiversity perspective, and the tool comes back to you and answers any questions that you have. And then at the end of the day, compiles a report, and then individuals come back to you after that. So it's kind of just taking the burden away, I think, is really important, because a lot of the time I'm hearing the burden is on the individual. So it's really important that the understanding flows throughout educational organisations, and then ultimately when people get into the world of work, get into the games industry, it will all trickle down, and that understanding and self-advocacy wouldn't need to be done as much.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ties in nicely to the points that I think Blushing and JJ were making earlier about how, like, you're already doing so much to not be overwhelmed by things that are happening, you know, like sensory input of so many varieties. So anything that can be done to, like you said, ease that burden, to just make it a little bit easier to get through things that neurotypical people would not even consider, like, and not even, you know, have a second thought about it being difficult to get work done in a place where there's a million other sounds happening or something like that. So yeah, thank you. That sounds really interesting. The AI thing that you were mentioning. Atari, would you like to go next and tell us a little bit about your thoughts on, you know, what workplaces can do to make more accommodations and adjustments?
Yeah, sure. I honestly think that one of the biggest things that managers or a workplace can do when they have like a project or a task that needs doing is to not focus on the fact that it needs to be done within a certain time frame, but focusing on what their team needs in order to get that done, to get that task done. Mm-hmm. Whether that involves like mapping a plan out together or realizing there are many ways to go about doing a task, like I had said before, because having neurodiverse people working for you is a huge plus. It's a huge benefit. It brings this diversity of thought, and it shows how people with different experiences, perspectives, and mindsets can do things in a creative way that, like you said earlier, a minute ago, managers may not even have considered. Mm-hmm. So accommodations that can be made are a couple things that have already been mentioned, like allowing the use of noise-canceling headphones or offering up noise-free areas in the office, not using like bright colors or anything in a workspace that causes like visual overload, using natural lighting or dim lighting instead of those bright fluorescent lights that can sometimes cause a headache or be really distracting. Opening up rooms and even corridors so that there's less chance for like physical space and like touching in between coworkers, because sometimes those of us who don't like any physical contact won't be bothered by that. But yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because a couple of people now have mentioned about like bright colors and things like that, and it's something that I have seen on like a handful of websites at best, but sometimes you'll get websites where they have like that color toggle where it takes it from being, you know, whatever bright colors it normally is to more muted versions, like desaturated versions. I want to say that I saw it on something like the British Autistic Society website or something similar to that.
Society?
Sorry?
National?
Yes,
Autistic
probably.
Society?
It was probably that, yeah, thank you. But yeah, I thought that was such a good option to have, because it does just like take away that little bit of overstimulation or discomfort that someone might feel, and just generally, you know, if you do those small things, making more space, for example, so you don't have to brush past people and touch people a lot, all of those small things can really add up to allowing someone who is neurodiverse or has sensory issues to like get through the day equitably with how a neurotypical person might get through the day, you know, where they're not having to constantly consider all these things. Thank you. Yeah. Adam, would you like to weigh in on this one as well?
Yeah, I think to go back to a very banner-based principle, the key thing in all these circumstances for the individual who is in the, let's say, controlling position, the one who is communicating to the neurodivergent person, is to go, not even to a neurodivergent, to anyone, is to go, I have to accept that I see the world in a certain way and you see the world in a certain way, but those two things may not be the same. And that I need to come as far towards understanding your way of seeing things as possible to make communication between us as easy as possible, and to really try to not assume, because as as we all experience, that person may, neurodivergent people might struggle with explaining what they need. They may not be able to articulate what they need. They may know what they need, but because the other person is very demanding or commanding about how they explain it, they may go, I'll just do it your way, then that's fine. But where compromises or masking or any of these things come into play is where bad things start to creep in, things like burnout or just exhaustion, or not feeling as secure in the workplace as they could do, which can lead people feeling less likely to come out and say, oh, this isn't working for me, or these are the issues that I'm having. So it's really, and really just starting from there and going, I need as much as possible to try and get to where you are and understand your way of approaching things. And just being kind of humble in that mindset is really the starting point for most things. And there are specific foundations which can make things easier or harder, and providing things on top of, as people have talked about. But generally, if everybody could just start from that place of going, I'm not assuming anything, and I'm going to work with you to figure it out. And when things do go wrong or are different, or what you're expecting to happen doesn't quite happen, take that as a sign, not as the person in front of you is intentionally or unintentionally making a mistake or doing it wrong, but that there's been a breakdown in communication, and it's your responsibility as much as it is theirs to come forward and say, hey, look, nothing's wrong, but what you created is not what I wanted. And that's my fault for not explaining it, so let's figure out a way that I can communicate that to you. And the more
And
people
that's how it should be.
Yeah.
100%. The more people who can start from that place, the easier it's going to be for neurodivergent people to exist in the workplace, because they will feel like people acknowledge that people are acknowledging not only them, but even for people who are neurodivergent and don't know it yet, it's going to be easy for them, because it helps them to work with you as much as you with them.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, JJ.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
It's just that I've always felt like it was my fault. So the manager didn't communicate very well with what he wanted, and then it just feels like what I've done was not what he wanted. I had no idea what I was doing. It felt like the fault was on me, and it just affected me mentally and for a while.
Yeah. Yeah,
so if I made a mistake, I just close in on myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the onus should be on the manager to, whether you have a formal diagnosis or not, to identify strengths. I know JJ talked about that hyper focus. If I've got a policy matter, I'll just kind of zone in, and I'll try and find out all the facts around it. And it's all about kind of picking out what people do best, and how to how to ensure that people can bring their best selves to the workplace. I know that Rosie from Safe in Our World did an interview with my former colleague Dom Shaw, and that was all about just seeing people as assets, because there are so many strengths to be brought to the table, and you need to be really open-minded and have a person-centric approach to be able to harness them.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead. Yeah.
A thing that always gets me, especially on that point, is that when you hire someone, you hire them because they have proven that they can do the job that you want them to do. That's why you hire someone. You look at whether it's their portfolio, their CV, and go, I believe based on this, you can do the job that I need to do. If you then explain that job and they do something else, you know that they could have done the job you were asking, because that's why you hired them. Therefore, the fault must lie in the communication of what that job was. Not that they misinterpreted, that they intentionally took what you said and went, I'm going to do something else. Or that they, that they are actually not as good as you thought they were. But that what you have explained to them has not turned in their mind into what you originally wanted. Which means you need to find a new way to communicate it, and not assume that the fault lies with the person at the other end, because they can do what you want them to do. You've just got to explain it to them in a way that they can understand.
Yeah, definitely. Blushing, go ahead.
I'm adding to that, not commenting on it. The communication part. Some people are doing really well with clear verbal messages. I do not. I can only speak for myself, but I know a lot of neurodivergent people, and so many of us say, please give it to us in writing and explain clearly. Even if you need to do a point-by-point thing, please do. Because if you have set up a kind of, these are the expectations, and even if this is going to be like maybe even you have a format, because this is going to be the same for every person doing this job. Make routines, lists, whatever, in writing, because there are so many people, not just the neurodivergent people like us, that would be helped by it, you know? If you help some, you actually help many more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. The writing stuff down is so interesting because that is an accommodation that has come up so many times, not only in this discussion about neurodivergence, but when we were talking in November about having like chronic pain conditions and like, you know, health conditions that can affect you neurologically. Just the simple supportive factor of, you know, helping someone to remember something. Because myself, like, I haven't been diagnosed with a neurodiversity, but I will pay attention to someone with the absolute best will in the world. I will listen to every single word that they're saying, and then I don't retain it unless I've written it down. And so oftentimes the onus is on me to take a lot of notes. Anyone who's ever worked with me knows that I go through notebooks like crazy, and just because I have to have it. Exactly, right. Because I have to have it written down.
This is my 5th or 6th of these.
Yes, everyone. Everyone with their notebooks. Yes. Okay, we're doing notebooks showing off. I've got
Post-it notes.
I've got
but
2.
I prefer my book.
Yeah, I have the big one for meetings, and this is the to-do list book. So
This is my screen then.
I've got mine locked away.
oh, hilarious. Yeah. But yeah, like it's so important. But it's, you know, I like taking notes. I'm happy to do it most of the time, but the responsibility shouldn't fall on me to always try and write stuff down. Like, if you are giving me information and you know that I deal better with written information, send me an email. And then, like, there's no chance of there being that miscommunication because you've written it down exactly what you've wanted, and, you know. But yeah, no, you all raised some really good points. I can see Rosie in the chat saying how wholesome it is that we're all sharing our notebooks. But yeah, thank you so much for all those recommendations. I think it's funny is the word I'm going to go with, but not like haha funny, just like a bit sad funny. The flexibility conversation is the thing that has come up in every single panel that we've done so far. And apart from December, we've done them every month since September last year. And flexibility and just having basic empathy from a managerial perspective is something that has come up with every single one. And I think it's something that so many people struggle with from a managerial perspective and also from an HR perspective, is being able to understand like the law, like labor laws locally, and internal practices, but being able to apply those differently and flexibly based on individuals. So many people will just go by the book, and a lot of times probably because they're scared of doing something wrong, but they'll go by the book and treat everyone the same, apply the rules, the training, whatever it is in the same way, and then be like the surprise Pikachu meme when it like doesn't work for people. I'm just going to take a quick second to read some of the comments we've had in the chat because we've had a lot of really nice ones.
Can I just add something though?
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
You don't need to be the manager or the CEO or whatever. You don't need leadership. You can be a colleague or a co-student or co-worker somehow. or a co-streamer for that matter, like
Yeah.
fellow streamers, we've got some of them in here, or content creators. Just the small ways of supporting each other and understanding and not judging.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Chaos and order in the chat said, I definitely feel when you have that "this is me" moment that really changes everything you knew about yourself, even without a formal diagnosis. Yeah, I think we were having a chat about it in the Safer Together Discord this week or last week, about people who are going through that process of being diagnosed or have recently been diagnosed or have been for a long time. And a lot of people, even though they didn't have that formal diagnosis, when they are self-diagnosed or awaiting diagnosis, they suddenly understand so much about themselves that they didn't before. And they're able to start making those changes to like their routine and their day-to-day to accommodate themselves even before they've been, they've had access to like formal support or government support or whatever. So I think that kind of education can be so valuable. Rio123 Blue Cat. Oh, sorry. Did I interrupt someone?
I had my note put it down again, but I'll put it back up.
Okay.
From where I've been, I call it the oh moment, because it's always, there's something, you'll read, once you start investigating neurodivergent stuff, especially if you are neurodivergent, you've not been able to assign that yet.
Mm-hmm.
There is always something. You either get to a capacity point where you've read enough things, or you just find that one story or article or meme or something that is so it reflects so accurately your own personal experience that you read it and you don't laugh, you go, oh. And I know so many people who have had that moment, including myself. And it's that point of realization where you go, oh, hang on a minute, this is not just a thing that exists in the air, but this is actually something that could genuinely apply to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that has so many sub things that you then it's sort of the tipping point of the curve. But yeah, no, I definitely understand that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Rio123 Blue Cat says, my godson is 10 and has only just been diagnosed with ADHD, autism, dyslexia. He is now struggling from moving from school streaming to a school that can support, and has resulted in him acting out and not understanding things. It's a shame that it's not something that can be picked up on at a younger age, and his life has now flipped 180, along with trying to find a suitable school. It's interesting how when you get that formal diagnosis, like, it does open a lot of doors, but there are so many things that could have been done prior to the point of the diagnosis to help you. Like, if a kid is acting out, it doesn't mean they're a bad kid necessarily. Like, there's
exactly, and don't say they're bad.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's probably other stuff going on, and like we've been saying for the past hour, like, basic empathy and just trying to communicate better and change the way you communicate can really help you get down to the bottom of like what is happening. The Demented Raven says, I was meant to get tested at 16, but it never happened. It was always assumed that I had autism growing up, but I wanted confirmation that it was true because I grew up with a parent who wasn't 100% honest, so I struggled to believe what came out of their mouth. I refused to use the term until I knew for sure, so being diagnosed as an adult helped a lot. Yeah, I think a lot of people, we kind of have this conversation as a charity quite often around any kind of mental health related topic, but the difference between, being self-diagnosed or pretty sure and having a formal diagnosis for some people can mean a huge amount to just like legitimize how they're feeling and sort of validate them, I guess, is the right word for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Validation.
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I remember the moment when I was diagnosed and the psychiatrist said, like, this is it, this is what it is. I somehow, like, I wasn't feeling like I was going to cry, but I just started crying. And she was like, this happens a lot with people who have been diagnosed because they finally have an answer and they know how to like live their lives now. And it just made so much sense.
Relief.
Yeah.
Huge relief. I knew already, and basically been told by professionals, but they couldn't diagnose me because they were not that kind of professional, you know? And I got that huge, like the moment the psychiatrist said, yep, officially putting this on the paper, because they told me before the last appointment that, hey, this is it, but I have to formally do this, you know? And then what told me, okay, and the next moment, and you're going to get to start trying medication in a week. And I went, what? That relief was immense.
Yeah. It is such a validation, because, I mean, if you're looking at, if you're late diagnosed, honestly, even if you're diagnosed, like, you know, as a child or a teenager, you're looking back at your entire existence up until that point and realizing you weren't the problem the entire time, when everyone until that point has basically been saying that you are. Like, you weren't a bad kid, and you weren't a rubbish employee, and on all these things that, you know, we've talked about already, of these, like, just stereotypes put on people for, you know, having different methods of communication and stuff. And it sounds like essentially you're realizing, like, there's nothing wrong with me, you know? Does that hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Okay, we got hands up. I'm gonna go with JJ first.
Yeah, sorry.
I like how polite everyone's being with the hands up, by the way.
Yeah. I most recently just watched a clip from like on TikTok. It's of an American drama, and there was a kid who feels like kind of misunderstood in school. So the main character, who's a teacher, but it doesn't seem like she's communicating in the right way with the child who could be neurodiverse. Yeah, and during the test, she gives I think this was after when the kid and his parents spoke to the teacher, and when the kid went out to wait until the mother was finished talking to the teacher, like she just as soon as the teacher pointed out, oh, he could have a learning disability, he could have ADHD, and she was like, oh, there is no such thing. You gotta sort your teaching right. Yeah. So the mother was displeased at the teacher's way of communicating and understanding of her child. Yeah. Yeah. It does make me fume a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, just...
What if that teacher was like one of me? My background is in that, working with children and youth. And I worked in schools, and I saw those kids, and I told the teacher, and I said, have you been considering that? And they said, we're in the works.
Yeah.
We're just about to talk to parents, and it didn't go really well. The reaction of the parent was like that. And the teacher said, because here in Norway, they're allowed to send a message anyway, even though the parent says, basically, because they're worried, right?
Yeah.
So they are allowed professionally to say, can we get some adaptation for this kid in school? The school has that right here. But that feeling, when you see parents or guardians say, no, nothing's wrong, and this is just how they are.
Yeah, it's honestly, like, it's heartbreaking to kind of see that sort of reaction of people where there's still so much stigma around it, that they think, you know, my kid can't be autistic, my kid can't have ADHD, because that would mean that there's something wrong with them, or, you know, there's that stigma around it still, that people shy away from it. Adam, did you have anything to comment?
Yeah, it links back to the previous point on this point, which is that for me, discovering kind of in myself and kind of self-diagnosing myself, it's almost like getting yourself on the starting block for a race. That it put me in a position where I believed it, I knew it, I'd put on the jersey. I was on the track and ready to run, but there were enough things that restricted me from doing it, like not wanting to impinge on spaces for people who were diagnosed, or the stigma around saying that you had this thing when it was self-diagnosis. Things which I don't as a diagnosed person don't think should exist, but they are still there, and that you feel that as a self-diagnosed person. And then getting the diagnosis was the thing that let me head off the starting blocks and run into the race. But I know so many people who are on those starting blocks, who are self-diagnosed and would love to be diagnosed, but whether it's a teacher who doesn't understand and thinks it's just a negative thing and refuses to accept it, doctors who refuse to move it forwards because they don't have the funding or they don't believe in it, people who believe that it could only exist in boys, or it could only exist in girls or non-binary or whatever, people who have some bias or lack of education but fundamentally believe they are correct and refuse to take a step back and read the information. And I to share a story, I've been there. I was in a situation where somebody approached me. In this case, it my wife going, so my wife is autistic, and she came to me, and when she first said that, this is years ago now, I said, oh no, I don't think you can be. That's what I said, because that's the education that I had learned. And I'm fortunate that the next day I went, actually, I'm going to go look into that. And I read about it and learned about it. And I went to my wife and I apologized profusely, because I was like, you know what? I was wrong. And I didn't know enough information. But a lot of people would not do that. A lot of people would not take time to go and learn and read about it and go, actually, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong here. Because you have to admit fault is hard, but it's a big step to being more inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being open-minded is just so key to that journey. I like the way you used the running analogy, because I just don't think the race is all over. We're just still continually running. It's like cross country, if you like. And we're just learning, and we're stumbling and getting back up again. And I mean, it's a journey, really.
Yeah, definitely. Wonderpuss Gospel in chat says, another adult diagnosed with ADHD, autism, dyspraxia. I push so much for the games industry in particular to be actually and not performatively neuro-inclusive. Statistics for autistic employment especially are really depressing in the games industry and outside of it. Yeah, I agree, and I think that, there are a number of reasons for that, and one thing that I think really could improve, just from having had a background in training recruitment, is the recruitment process. So often the recruitment process is not accommodating of people who have differing needs. It's so rigid. The expectations are so both high and specific in terms of just if someone can do the job. It's Adam, like what you were saying about the CV thing earlier, if someone can do the job, they can do the job, but if they can't behave exactly how you need to behave to get through the interview process, they're never going to have the opportunity to do that job. And that, you need to use the word flexible again, because you have to be flexible in how you approach recruitment and, offer those accommodations and, try different tactics to talk to someone to find out more about them, and don't just follow your exact set sheet and, be surprised when it doesn't work well with some people and they don't answer the questions how you think that they're going to, or something like that.
I mean, in my current organisation, one of my co-chairs, he was given his interview questions in advance. And that's not to say that he couldn't do the job, because he definitely had the skills, but it's just kind of removing those barriers are just so important, and those simple things, not giving people a heads up they can do the role. All you need to do is just make these very simple tweaks.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, having the questions in advance can be really valuable in neurodivergence, because of the cognitive processing time that sometimes is needed. which can be really stressful in an interview, because in an interview, if you even wait 5 seconds to answer a question, it feels like you've been sat in silence for hours. So you're more than likely gonna try and start talking, too soon and not be able to, give it your best answer. So that's a really good idea or example. I Need Dr. Ferrets says, being honest, I'm very nervous about asking to have my neurodiverse needs met and also coming out as gender non-conforming. I'm worried I'll be faced with a lot of resistance to both rather than either individually. Yeah, I know that this person has been in our Discord server and kind of talking about their experience with, I guess, coming to understandings with those things and coming out and talking about those things. And it is really scary and really challenging. And when we were talking about kind of trans and GNC folks on one of our last panels, we talked about how it's not just a case that you come out once and it's done, like you're constantly having to tell people. And it's the same with anything, asking to have your needs met, asking people to use like X pronouns, whatever. You have, it's not just like one and done and then everyone's going to accommodate you. Like you have to keep talking about it and keep advocating for yourself, and that can be scary and it can be exhausting. I absolutely agree. But I know that this person, I Need Dr. Ferrets, has been making some really good progress, so I'm really happy to be able to see that in the Discord. And then last one, just for this minute, we have Sharky77. Just got here, but I think it's a great topic and have just passed my level 2 in understanding autism. I understand more how other people may not understand individuals' needs and requirements. One of the key learning points I found was knowing that an individual's preferred method of communication is so important to get the most out of interactions. I think all of this helps to control environments and sensory inputs. Yeah, definitely. We were just talking about that, and you're absolutely right. And even, like, not from like a management perspective, Blushing, like you were alluding to a minute ago, like even as colleagues or as friends, like if you use that person's preferred method of communication, like a Discord message or whatever, or if they do prefer verbal communication or they do want to see you and kind of have a conversation about it rather than an email, if you talk to them how they need to be spoken to, you are going to have a better interaction with that person, whether you're in the workplace or you're in education or you're just talking to a friend. So that will lead me on to my sorry, go ahead. Oh, sorry, I thought someone was going to say something.
It was an echo from you into, I think,
okay.
Anderona's microphone.
Okay, no worries. So my last question that I wanted to touch on was, how do you feel that things are going? Do you feel that whether it's education institutions, work, or other professional settings, do you feel like things are getting better in terms of inclusivity and representation around neurodiversity? And if you do think they are getting better, do you have any examples of like how they might be getting better? Anderona, I am going to pick on you first for this one, if that's okay.
That's completely fine. I think overall things are improving. So there's more information out there. There's in general a lot more understanding. I mean, usually there's just this kind of, or in the past there's been a need to mask and cover up, and there are still needs to do that, still persists, but I feel like the discourse we're getting to now, there's so much more improvement, everything is online, there's a lot more technological advancements, and I think there's still more to be done at the same side of saying, things are improving, because I think that there's the overarching perspective that adjustments that can be made are like so difficult and so expensive, and they're not really. So I think the demystifying processes like access to work and so on, and getting a better understanding of what is actually out there is really key, and now's the time.
Yeah, Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. That's all really good and valid. I felt like I had something else that I was going to say to you, but I can't remember what it is now. So I'm going to move on, but I might come back to that in a minute. Let's see. Who do we want to do next? Adam, would you like to let us know how you feel like the industry is doing at the moment, educational or work-wise?
Things are better, but I think things are better because there is, for want of a better word, noisy. Neurodivergent, for good reason, is becoming very noisy and making itself known. Because post-pandemic, so many people came out of the pandemic going, oh, something is different about me. I got diagnosed because early in the sort of 6 months into the pandemic, all my coping mechanisms that I didn't even know I had been taken away, and I had lost all kind of short-term memory and was kind of freaking out about that. And I was lucky I had a friend who went, hey, have you looked up ADHD? So I was very lucky that somebody pointed that out to me. And post-pandemic and post-diagnosis, I have chosen to be very loud about the fact that I have ADHD and go to people and shout about it and talk about it and be very loud. And I've had people come to me because of that and go, so what exactly is ADHD? And explain it to them. And I've had multiple friends go and get diagnosed because of coming out of the pandemic and hearing more about it and more people talk about it, which is great. This is what we want is people being able to, we want people to better understand themselves, neurodivergent or neurotypical alike. Knowing yourself is important for being able to understand yourself and work as best as you can to help yourself. But how much is changing in the industry? I think there are more. I think what I would say is there are more proponents of it. We've talked about Race the Game and is doing a lot of work. Minicats and DNA is doing a lot of work. Like I said, the reason I'm launching Paying Attention is because I want to raise awareness of ADHD and the things that are around it and improve the education. But also the reason I'm launching it is because there isn't anything. There isn't a group. This is the reason Paying Attention is the first group in the UK, is because there hasn't been a group in the UK before. And when I was diagnosed and I went looking, the only group who mentioned ADHD was Safe in Our World. And so things are changing, and I think the more this stuff happens, the more people shout about it, the more it will change. But I think we are in the early stages of that happening, and a lot of companies have got to take that on board and start to recognize that there are processes to put in place and things to do to get that change, to start initiating that change.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, we'll absolutely link to Paying Attention when we put the video out on YouTube. But you're right. I think that your kind of assessment of the situation is really valid in terms of there's more talk about it, but not necessarily the action to back it up, I guess. I did also remember the kind of follow-up question I had for Anderona. I was like, oh, I need to write it down. I tried to write it on my hand. The pen wouldn't work. It was a whole thing, so sorry. It was about when you'd mentioned about masking, and this is a question kind of for the group, a sub-question. When you think about masking and you think about the move toward like hybrid and online working environments, do you feel like you generally find that easier because you don't have to mask as much when it's like written communication? Would that be fair to say, or what are your feelings about it, JJ? I saw you nodding.
Oh yeah, for me definitely. When it's written, like if I'm face to face, like I do have to feel like I have to mask a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to your question about the hybrid nature of work and so on, I can really relate to what's been said about the start of the pandemic. I found that I had so much more energy, and I was like, what's going on? Like, what is this all about? And I was just spending so much time. I mean, there's the visual processing memory, there's the sensory overload you can get with, for instance, if you're boarding a train and you're bumping into people. All of these things take up a significant amount of energy, and you're having to mask the effects of it or mitigate the effects of things. And almost these strategies you've learned over time, you don't really think about, but they do take a lot of energy. So the switch to remote has its drawbacks, but also its benefits, because you're not having to, you can just get on with the work, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. I can see lots of nods of agreement. But yeah, like popping back out from my sub question back to the headline question, I suppose. We'll go with Atari, you next. Yeah, how do you feel about how things are going in terms of educational professional settings and inclusivity?
Yeah, I also don't know how much it's improving, but I do know that it is improving slightly. It's being talked about just like we're doing here, and so many human resources groups at the workplace. And for me, that's the first step. So I think we're going on the path towards possibility, I guess.
Yeah.
I've also read somewhere that there's dialogue going about in the hiring process changing with keeping neurotypicals in mind. And I know we talked about interviews for a minute, but interviews are hard sometimes because there's an expectation for this rapid fire back and forth question and answer, and sometimes it can be quite intimidating. Like, there'll be a question and it's like, what are your strengths? And I've already forgotten my first and last name. I don't know how to tell you my strengths. So I would have loved, like Anderona said, having a question in advance. That would have been amazing. But overall, I just hope that as well as workplaces in general change to include those of us who are neurodiverse. It's also hard because neurotypical people wouldn't think of any of these changes, accommodations, hiring process, any of these things that we've talked about this past hour, even a big deal. But there are so many people like myself and us who would feel so much better, much more relaxed, much more safer if all of these things were thought of.
Yeah, definitely. And I really do hope that, for having you all come here and talk about it, and just generally the more and more discourse we have about neurodiversity, the better understood it will be, and making steps like talking about it here and hopefully sharing this video with as many people as we can will aid in that understanding. I would hope that people who are watching this now or who watch it later might learn something that they didn't already know, or kind of be inspired to look at a situation in a different way, based on what you all have said. So I have yet to ask you, Blushing, if you'd like to, let me know your thoughts around our trajectory for inclusivity, I guess.
I will say in Norway, in schools, especially up to senior high, things are changing to the better. It's not there yet, but it's changing to the better, maybe more than in many other countries. But that's in-person school, and there is a way that some students can do online schooling as well, for different reasons, if that's what they need to. But it's not there yet with that either. That came with the pandemic, really. And then for the situation I'm in, I'm, as I said earlier, not in traditional workspace, right? I'm in the content creation sphere. The environment of content creation was when I started 7+ years ago, close to 7.5 years ago, not a neurodivergent friendly place at all. Rather the opposite. And then within a quite short time, more and more people started to say, here is me. Like, I was open about mental health stuff from day one, literally. And then more people did, and then more, and then more. And then, not only mental health, but, oh yeah, by the way, I'm autistic. Oh, I'm an ADHD. They knew that about themselves, but they hadn't been speaking about it openly. And the more people did that, the more people started talking about it. And then we started getting educational content on Twitch, YouTube, eventually TikTok. TikTok is huge for education, from also professionals, but also people who are autistic, ADHDers, and other neurodivergencies. But so is Twitch. it's changing to the better in a big way. There are still those that will use, as an example, autistic as a curse word, like judging people and literally talk down on people for it. Yes, but there's way less of it now.
Yeah.
This is me being very frank. I've seen it all for 7+ years, and yeah, it's changing to the better. We're not there yet in that either. There's going to be those people who we just basically move on from. But the overall environment is better.
And that's a great point you made about how, you know, like platforms like TikTok or streaming services or whatever give more people the opportunity to share their experiences. And hopefully, yes.
A lot of people go, oh, you spoke about ADHD. And I have a couple of people who came to me after I started talking about it and said, oh yeah, I'm in the process of being diagnosed, and they looked into it. And now they've been diagnosed.
Yeah, I think that that's awesome, and hopefully that kind of trend continues. And I guess the more commonly it becomes accepted in wider society, the faster it will start to become accepted in the workplace, which is, you know, unfortunately always seems to be the one that's like dragging behind a little bit rather than pioneering these types of issues. But it is hopeful that we're moving in the right direction. JJ, sorry.
Educational part, so I said up to senior high.
Yeah.
Universities, they are their own beast.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We're not close to a lot of other countries in adaptation here for university. There is starting, but it's in early stages. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that will improve. But it's also interesting to hear the kind of difference between how things are in Norway versus how things are in the UK. But it is good to hear that kind of in both places things do seem to be moving in the right direction, even if it's really, really slow. JJ, how do you feel about representation and understanding around neurodiversity in the industry? Because I know, I mean, the game you're working on, Himble Ventures, is a huge kind of proponent for inclusivity and that kind of stuff.
Neuro-inclusive, definitely. Well, if I run my own company, yes, I will be very neuro-inclusive and I will change. I think I mentioned a few times before that it's the neurodiverse people who speak for neurodiversity.
Yeah.
So, like Adam's running his own company who accommodates a lot of neurodiverse employees. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It will change as long as we keep speaking, as we stick to what we believe in.
Yeah.
It just sounds.
And I think it's really powerful to see people who are openly neurodiverse, you know, being in positions where they're, you know, working for really well-known companies, they have their own companies. You know, the more visibility there is of neurodiverse people being successful and, you know, kicking ass at life and just, you know, being great people, the more accepted and the more discussed that kind of stuff is going to be. So yeah, it's awesome to see. P.S. the kick-ass people I mentioned is everyone on this call, and you all helping to.
I also I also would like to add, I'm going to give a shout out to NFTS Games.
Okay.
As well, because when I got on the course, my neurodiverse needs were very met.
Is that so?
Yeah.
What is NFTS Games? Sorry.
That's the course I was on.
Okay, cool.
And the uni I went to, the National Film and Television School.
Oh, okay, cool. And they were really accommodating.
Yeah, they were very accommodating. So that's where I started Himble Ventures.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and it feels like I really need to put something out there that's gonna stop the stigmas.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in a good environment, it just gives you the motivation, like the courage to believe in yourself more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the head of the department has been very aware of neurodiversity. So if I found myself overwhelmed, they suggest going to see student support or using their neurodiversity friendly facilities or wearing headphones. So it just meant a lot to me, and I wouldn't think of anywhere else that could accommodate neurodiversity as well as they did.
Yeah. Well, and clearly it has the results, because you own a company, you're making a whole ass game. If you support people, clearly it works.
Yeah, even about the quiet room, I did suggest maybe we can put some weighted blankets in there, or ear defenders, or the walls are painted white, so that's perfect. So they kind of let me put some input on there.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good.
You have the agency to.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we're talking about in just allow people to tell you what they need, have the flexibility to give them what they need. Don't assume, I'm going to make a sensory friendly room as a neurotypical person and it's going to look exactly like this and that's going to be grand. Let people tell you what they need and be accommodating of that. So, yeah. Thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but that's also true, and this is important, but that's also true for neurodiverse people to I'm a neurodiverse person, but other divergent people might be different from me, and therefore I need to be aware of accommodating them. You can't go, I'm a neurodivergent person, therefore everything that accommodates me accommodates everyone. You equally have to be aware of it too, and go, you should be more aware of it, but some people go, oh, I've got this far, and now I'm now correct. The same thing. You have to be aware that people are different and make sure that you're doing what you can to accommodate all different people and all different neurodivergencies.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a saying, if you met one person with ADHD, you met one person with ADHD, and the same goes for the autism. There's the same saying to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even on this panel, we've seen how all of you have very different experiences, perspectives. Each of you have picked up on, different things. You've mentioned different things that, for example, overstimulate you, or adjustments that you've asked for. We haven't just had 5 of the exact same person giving their experience on this call. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining. I've seen so many lovely messages in chat of people just hearing you and appreciating what you're saying. And I appreciate it massively as well. I'm gonna go around the room and ask you all to just plug your stuff. If you've got anything that you want people to know about, then now's your time to say it. And I will put all the links in the YouTube description when we upload this. But Anderona, feel free to go first. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
I just wanted to plug my own stuff, if that's okay.
Of course.
If anybody wants to reach out to me about any matters relating to neurodiversity, my inbox is open. You're best off reaching me on LinkedIn. That's Anderona Cole. I'm also on Twitter at It's A Cole World, so that's _ITS _ACOLEWORLD.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Blushing, what would you like to tell us about?
I am BlushingCrafter on Twitch and on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and I am BlushingCrafter _ on Instagram and on TikTok at BlushingCrafter.
Oh, someone on Instagram really just ruined that, didn't they? Awesome. I will put all of those links below. Atari, what would you like to plug?
So you can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Hey Atari with 2 I's at the end. So HEYATARII. And then on YouTube and Instagram at Hey Atari with only 1 I at the end.
Awesome. Thank you. Adam, go ahead. Now's your time.
You can find majority on Twitter at AdamB114. You can also find out more about Game Dev London at GameDev.London. Kind of big open game developers. And if you're interested in the stuff I'm working on or playing attention, it's ADHD In Games.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And JJ, what have you got to tell us about?
Yeah.
Plug your things.
Yep, so I'm Himble Ventures on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the game, get Chapter 1 completed as quick as possible. You can support me on Ko-fi, and it's called Himble Ventures Game.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm also on YouTube, but I'm not on there very much. So check it out if you want to. But
yeah, I've loved
Same
seeing
name.
the updates of all like your renders and stuff on Twitter. That's been really cool to see the whole like behind the scenes process. Cool. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. To anyone watching, if you do feel like you're in need of support, if you are struggling, there are international resources on safeinourworld.org that you can access. They've all been, vetted and approved by us, and they are for a lot of different countries. So hopefully you'll be able to find something that you can do, that you can use to get help. And if you would like a safe and supportive community, then you can find us on discord.gg/safer together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.